Well, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Authors Lead. I'm super thrilled to have Julia Packwood here. She's the founder of Nurturing Wild Ltd. Is an educational and forest leadership school leader with over 20 years of experience, and she helps parents and educators support children's learning through outdoor, nature-based play. And she's featured in Family First and other early years platforms, and she's inspired to help families reconnect with nature for healthy, happy childhoods. And I'm so glad she's here. She's a listener just like you, and she responded to my call, which is, please let me know how you're doing and what you want. And she reached out, and I invited her on my show so that it can help you, Julia, get what you need out of this and also maybe help other people. So welcome to the show, Julia. I'm glad you're here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And firstly, what a privilege to be in this position. And I truly hope that for anybody who's listening, who has a knocking idea for a book, but is finding themselves stuck, is really going to get some benefit from this chat today.
As you started to tell me right before we got on air that you have some stuckness going on in your world of writing, that when you go to sit down, it's like not happening. Let's talk about that. What happens when you go to sit down to write and seemingly nothing really comes to be?
So I think for me, I've been really lucky. I've got some fantastic opportunities to write for as you've mentioned, for early years or parenting, magazines or a website, guest blogging. So it's such an opportunity to shift my identity. It's sort of felt recently, looking back to where I was even a year ago, where I was an unpublished author or writer, to where I've got to now. But as I'm have the process where there's, for example, an agreed date that I've got a deadline to submit, and they're usually around 2,000 words, which a friend of mine was saying is roughly about a chapter. Um, and yet a deadline helps, but the writing process itself, I feel like I'm in a bit of a battle with myself, if that makes any sense. I
Absolutely.
think, and I think there's probably a little bit of like the editor trying to barge in, and it's sort of really, I think I need to almost allow a bit more space for that, the creative to come through without oh, we need to edit this and we need to adjust this and we need to go and research this. So I feel the focus, is perhaps potentially one of the issues. Um, but it is, and I get it done, and I've been really pleased with it when it's happened, but it always feels like a real physical, mental ordeal at the moment, which I know is absolutely not how it should be.
Well, I an interesting fact is that that's actually how it is. You say it's not supposed to be like that. That's the first point of resistance. If you accept that that's how it is and you just breathe into it and go, this is what it is to be an author. Nothing's wrong with me. I'm not doing it wrong. This is the feelings authors feel. And I think it's different than writing for school, which is how we trained most of our lives to be academics, write this way with this deadline and this, doing it for someone else. We rarely wrote for ourselves with the same expectation. So the feeling is, well, I don't know what to do. I mean, who's going to tell me when it's done? Or like, how do I know? Or how does this get passed off my plate? Or it's just conditioning from early life. School has done this to us. I know I was part of the problem. I was a teacher. I know that this is what school has done. But what I want you to remember is that the essence of your work is about play, correct?
Mm.
About nature, about
Yes,
being outdoors,
absolutely.
connecting with that
Yeah,
spirit.
yeah.
So if you're not writing in a space that's that like that, then that might be some of the resistance. If you're trying to work at a computer in an office and you're writing about play and being outdoors, be curious. Huh. I'm writing about this idea, and yet here I am in this room, in this box, in this computer. Curious about that. I'm not saying that you're doing it wrong. I'm just saying that
Mm.
curiosity sparks in my heart to be curious. For me, let me just say what happened for me. Every time I sit to write, for the 24 years I was trying to write a book, let's just be honest, it wasn't like a few months. It was decades. Every time I opened the computer, I'm at the age where I had a blinking cursor. I would sit, and every time I sat, it felt like I should be doing work, but no work was coming. And so my block was always there for me, which was this place of I'm supposed to be doing it here. This is efficient. This is where I do work. Why am I not doing it? So I made the decision I'm going to take a notebook, and I'm going to get a notebook that doesn't have lines, because that feels like
Mhm.
schoolwork too. So it looked
Yep.
more like a coloring journal, like a big book of sort of off-white paper. I said, I'm going to write in this. And I took myself away from my desk, and I began to write every chapter in a pad in this book. And finally it started to flow because I was removing myself from my situation. Maybe your book of being in nature should be inspired by places of nature where you feel like you're unlocking the things you're actually writing about.
I mean, that's something I hadn't considered. And you're quite right. I am literally in a box room. I'm very lucky. I have this, we've got the spare room, and I've got my desk. And okay, I could use that for work, but perhaps actually for my writing, I could be doing it outside. I spend a lot of my time outside. And in truth, I really am inspired when I'm outdoors in nature. And I think I've got thousands of photographs on my phone where just a moment out in that space, you suddenly, by paying attention, there's just absolute curiosity everywhere to look, which is why I just love seeing it through the eyes of children. They marvel at nature, as we really should ourselves. We forget, we get busy. I really get it. I've got two young children. I'm trying to run my business. Life is hectic. Um, but actually, when you connect with nature, when you take a moment, for example, it was raining on Monday during my family session, and we go for a walk at the start of every play session, and the children were fascinated to just see tiny globules of water droplets on the leaves, and it was genuinely interesting. And you just think that's a little moment, that's a little daily dose of nature, but also that it's art. Looking at that, it's visually artistic, it's creative. So I think you've tapped into something there that I'm definitely going to make a note of.
The resistance gets created in the work. I think most people think of writing, the act of producing a message for someone else on a page, as an assignment for school or work. I want you to think of it as an opportunity to be in that glorious, wondrous space where you don't need thought to be beholden of something magical, because that's what you're saying to us at the reader. You won't be able to do this in the way that you could if you don't exercise what you're trying to teach. So step into the woods, bring a journal, go there, and the inspiration won't hold itself back. It will speak to you in a way that you'll just capture whatever comes. You might have an intention for that piece that day, but you won't have to look for the inspiration. It will just be there. And then when you come back
Yeah.
to your office, you go, I'm just going to transcribe this onto this page now. And you're not writing, you're transcribing. So you don't have to think about that workspace as writing. It's the place where I'm just gathering my stuff off this page and putting it in here.
Uh, and yeah, and when I decided that I really this it feels like a calling. You talk about, just remember this podcast episode where you talked about it like a snowflake dropping for a book idea. And it feels like it's just tapping me on the shoulder and nudging me, saying, write, we want you to write the book, whatever people believe in. But it feels, my intuition feels it so strongly. And I guess with me starting my business, that's a very different, and fundamentally, we have to be very practical and pragmatic. That, I understand for publishers, they need to sell books in order to be, there is always going to be the business side. But I have felt a lot of people around me want to redirect me from this path that I feel so strongly in my intuition to serve parents, to write for a parent audience. And very well meaningly, lots of people around me, perhaps from a more business world, are saying, no, you need to write for the education world. And I just feel those two are together because as we were talking previously, as a parent, you're your child's number one teacher. You're the one who, when I trained when I stepped into early years, into nursery and reception, you don't keep, the children are not sat writing in books all day, or they certainly used to not be like that. And you'd have instead more visual records that you keep of the children. And I remember having an assessment where we had to sit through and do moderation and talk about the children. And you never knew, what child they were going to pick. And I just remember that I'd spent hours and hours and, throughout the whole time with the children, creating these beautiful books that really showcase their work. But when I sat down for that moderation, we didn't need to touch those books once. And I remember saying to the moderator, "Oh, we haven't looked at these." And I just remember her saying, "I don't need to, because all the examples you've given me through discussing about that child really shows me that you know that child and you understand their needs and their next steps and what they're able to do now and what they need to, where you're supporting them next." And I think as parents, there's sort of the job that the school does, but we need to also remember that we play a really valid role, a big part in shaping our children too.
Yeah. So your intuition is not wrong. How can intuition be wrong? Firstly. Secondly, when people think of a book as a product, they've already lost their way, in my opinion. And I think people misunderstand what I do because I say, well, build your book and your brand. That speak to people who first need to, they think that's what they're looking for. And then when they come work with me and I say, okay, now let's find out who you are. They're like, well, we don't need to talk about who I am. I mean, here's my bio, but this is my thing. I'm talking about this. I'm like, oh no, the world doesn't need another thing. The world needs you. And your intuition is part of you. I mentioned this to a group I was coaching the other day isn't it remarkable that humans have a solo fingerprint that only identifies you, no other person in the world now or forevermore? And the same thing, the trait of your eyes, no one will ever have that sort of trait. Isn't that remarkable? Your intuition is like that. No one will ever be able to understand your intuition because it's a signature to you alone. There's only a reason why you are being called to this. It's not a business proposition. It's something different. That's why I tell people, don't get caught up in the idea that books are words. And then people go, well, wait, aren't books just words? How could they not be words? And I say, well, words are just the container that's holding the message that I'm passing on that I can't give you because I'm not going to be in everyone's presence. So I'm doing my best to put this message with this limited container called words that I want to pass to you. And so what you're passing to us is part of your intuition. So you have to have that infused. So the very fact that the stumbling block for you was writing wasn't surprising. It's necessary because I bet if you go write about this idea of what it's like to write in the woods versus not, you will find a remarkable conversation to have with parents because you're experiencing as an adult who's resisting this yourself, the person who's trying to write about that. Isn't that curious? I think that's the part that will really serve you because this book has to serve you first. It can't serve anyone else if it's not serving you because otherwise it's just information. And in the age of AI, you could give it stuff. Tell me, write me a book about this and it'll write a beautiful book about stuff. But we don't need more stuff. We need perspective from individuals who have a viewpoint, whose magic comes from their whole entire life experience, from their perspective, their ups and downs, their successes and sorrows. That's what makes your perspective. That's the lens you've sharpened over time to makes it so accurate, so precise that whatever you shine through that lens becomes igniting to the person who reads it. As long as you remember you're the one we're looking for, not what you know. The
Yeah.
expertise doesn't come from your knowledge or experience. That's what the outside world says. Your expertise comes from your perspective. So if you treat writing more like the art that you feel happens when you talk about kids and nature, then it will become more effortless. The more you make it like adult, do it like this, the less able you are to connect to the beauty and wonder that you're trying to describe.
And I think, full disclosure, even though my business is all about outdoors, I grew up in Wales. I was very fortunate to basically grew up in the 80s. I had a childhood where we had freedom. As long as we were back in time for tea, we could go and have unsupervised play outside. And it was only, I now live in London, very urban, and it was only since I became a parent. And, I was a teacher where we had an outdoor space, but because it was so urban, I don't know why, but I never stopped to think, how can we add more nature into this space for the children? It just, you're thinking about the maths learning, the physical development, it just didn't, it just wasn't obvious to me. Then when I became a parent, I don't know if I'm the only one in this, but you spend a lot of, I think your childhood sort of comes back to you a bit when you are, now that role's reversed and you're no longer the child, you're the parent. And I don't want my children, in urban to be missing out on that time, and we know nowadays, which is why I feel this book is so, it is very current, and it does need to be said, because we've got a situation where children are spending more and more time on screens. They're not outdoors. Schools are, there's so much information that they're putting on children, the playfulness that we know is so important for young children, for their brain development, for their social skills, is being squashed because schools have gone very, very academic, certainly here in England. And the children need it. And parents need it, because I think, again, there's a lot of talk about how, you know, the new thing for children to do is organized activities. And of course, there's a place for them. But I really feel that the biggest message that I feel is just how it can be so simple, and that almost nature, a sort of book title idea is sort of let nature lead the play. You don't need to plan. You don't need to, have a little few things in your toolkit of knowledge about how you can, there might be opportunities, but it's essentially, you're simply getting outdoors, seeing what your child's interested in, and you're just paying attention. Um,
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful reason to write a book, and it's an extraordinary call because not everyone feels this way. Not everyone can see it this way. Not everyone had the experience of childhood that you had. And if they did, many of them have let it go as childhood memories. And you're reclaiming this. And I think one of the things you had asked me when we first connected, and I said, why don't we talk about this more on the podcast to see if we can help people, is who am I to write this? Do I have enough expertise? We might call it something like imposter syndrome or things like this. But what it is remind yourself, imposters can't have imposter syndrome. Right? They think they're all right. They're not the ones with the fear. So don't worry if you have it. You're the one. Um, and that I believe anyone who chooses to write a book about something they care about is taking a risk. And heroes are all reluctant in my mind, though some might argue, because heroes never wanted to be called. They just were. They're like, oh, I was just minding my business, really, and this thing came to me. And now it won't let me go. It keeps me up at night. It keeps prodding me. It keeps happening. Right. That's why my Angela quote I had told you before, there's no greater agony than an untold story inside of me or inside of you. That's the thing. So your expertise lies in your perspective on what you just shared, because children don't need adults to play. I want you to think about what you said. They don't need guided time for play, and adults have structured play. Think of why. The rules of school require control. Who's in control when you walk in the classroom? The teachers. They make it very clear they're in charge and they're in control. My wonder is why? Why are you in charge? Well, because I'm older, I'm smarter, I have the responsibility. I'm like, that's interesting. Let's play a game, because games reveal who's really in control. The game's in control. So if you structure play so that someone is in control, then play stops whenever an adult wants it to stop. Children's rules for play are different. Kids' rules look like something like play, and adults' rules look like something like classroom, right? So rules are really important to kids, but the rules for play are different. Rules for play is, how do we keep playing? How do we stay in the moment of joy and ecstasy? How do we negotiate when it doesn't go, when play stops? Their rules are different. And when you go into the woods, the forest, nature, and you experience wonder, then the rules of adulthood disappear. That's why I think you're going to find yourself letting go of the rules of writing when you go into the woods. There are no rules of writing. Let go of the idea that there's something called a chapter. Let go of the idea that books are organized in a certain way. And you'll find the book telling you what to do, because that's the nature of play. How do we keep doing this? Well, I find my spot in the sunshine. That's part of the play. You'll find the way. And if you use the tools of what you're calling your children to, wonder, curiosity, you won't worry about what to write when you go. You might have an intention, but don't worry, the lesson will come. So I think you found a little bit of the spark that will help you start to move forward. Whenever you're feeling stuck, go, where am I at? Oh, I'm sitting in my office. No wonder I'm stuck. Then it's time to get out of here. Even if that means going to sit outside next to your favorite bougainvillea or plant or whatever it is, and you sit there and you remind yourself about why you're there, and it will ignite the thing that you're there for. And I don't think you'll have as much of a challenge, because I moved away from the computer, which felt like this is supposed to be good. You're supposed to do this right, into a place of, I know my writing looks terrible when I write on there. I have cursive writing, but I'm dyslexic, so I know that every other word is spelled wrong. In my joy, I don't worry because there's no squiggly lines underneath there saying I spelt it wrong. There's no correction of my grammar. It just lets me say what I need to say. So try it on.
Even as you've said that, I'm smiling because I think as a teacher, I knew I wanted to be a teacher from the age of 5. I did straight into Bachelor of Education. I spent a long period of time, I have spent over 20 years now in education, but in school-based, I think it's around about 15 years. And I honestly think the moment where I stepped out of the classroom, became a mum, and then I took this journey to train as a forest school leader, I've almost had to unschool myself, because I, as a teacher, firmly believed that schools had the children's best interests at heart. But as what you were saying, it's about control. It's about being able to tick a box very often and saying, oh, we're able to measure this, when actually, as you're saying, through play, it's so holistic, on so many different levels beyond just this is maths when a child is out looking at a leaf. It goes beyond that. And just as you were saying about allowing the book to flow, I was at that sort of connection of, well, nature is governed and flows by the seasons. So that already, how exciting, instead of having, this is the chapter, this is the format, that perhaps I just go with the flow of the seasons with the writing.
You won't have to wonder. It'll just happen. And for those of you listening going, well, I'm writing a book about business economics, this seems silly. I want to tell you the same thing, is that if you reach deeply into why you're doing what you're doing, and this is why the intention of why is so important, why I think you're already on the right path, Julia, is your why is the seed of the reason the book exists and the reason it propels itself forward. If you're doing it out of an act of service and you feel called to do it, the book has a stronger meaning. If you're writing it as a product you sell on Amazon, then you'll have a product at the end. Not a problem. Nothing wrong with writing a book about 15 ways to make money as a dog walker. Fine. But don't expect miracles to happen. You might sell a product. It's a widget. Publishers often see books as a widget. I need to sell 485,000 widgets a year to keep my job. So they figure out ways to find the best way to sell widgets. But authors are the creators of something magical, whether it be a book about business or a book about the forest and play. Your presence is more important in that book than the thoughts you have about it. And I know that's a strange thing to say, but if you don't see yourself in there, then it'll be just stuff that you know. And AI is already way smarter than we
Yeah.
are. So don't try to beat knowing, but it can never be present. It can never be in that forest. It can never experience those moments of aptitude that comes from being in the space you're trying to talk about. So trust your intuition. If your intuition is like, oh my gosh, season, then beautiful. Then nature's already calling. Trust in that. So let's take a little pivot, because that might serve your writing. But what else is lingering in the background that often when people go to write, they think about, oh, but what about my book? what else might be here for you. Maybe this is all you needed. Maybe this is what will shift your perspective, and you'll come tell me later that it's helped. But maybe there's
I
something else
think,
there.
yeah, I think you're right. The seed of the book, and truth be told, I'm so busy. I've got young children. This would never be the moment where you think, I've got lots of time. I can sit and write this book. That's not my life right now. But I feel the perspective and the lens. I am currently at the coalface of what the very reader I'm hoping to motivate and inspire is going through. And it just feels it won't, I need to do it now. Otherwise, I won't be able to look back retrospectively in the same way. So that's really, really helpful. And I just love the idea of just taking it outdoors with a notebook. I'm going to do that. I think that I'm very lucky. I've got a little beautiful space in my back garden that I could just go out with a cup of coffee even in the morning and just write. I love that idea. So thank you. I think for me, and as you said, with AI, I mean, it's so good. When I've written a blog post and I've popped, the opening paragraph that's my own work into AI and say, please, can you help me come up with a hook? It is so good. And I think you're right that it's not about the information. And I know that in order to surpass AI, it's about telling, I guess I think another block potentially for me is how I know that really to make the impact, it's about giving real life examples and almost that really storytelling, and how to kind of perhaps, maybe I'm about to say to do it right. That doesn't make sense. But, how to get that balance of being open, being honest, but also being professional, because for me, it's
Hmm. So, so let's make simple prompts. So whenever an author said, well, how much of that storytelling? I mean, if it's all storytelling, isn't it a storybook? If it's all my perspective, isn't it just my opinion and like a biography? And if I just do a list of facts, is it just a textbook? Yes, those all separate can be those ways. Doesn't mean you have to be, but it does require a little more imagination. So depending on how imaginative you are, you can use any one of those types of things. I call them a fierce wondering or a bold claim, something that you're really interested in such a way that you're going to just be on the page curious in such a deep way that you're unfolding something for the reader. Or you're making such a bold claim, which something like for me as a writing coach, my bold claim is don't ever start writing a book with an outline, which infuriates most of my peers who are book coaches. I'm not a former editor become book coach. I am a lost soul finding my way through books. Um, you My bold claim is an outline creates a pathway that's too concrete to ever let you meander. So I say, my bold claim is create the outline when you're done, not before. Because my bold claim is that imagine you have a prize rose in the back garden and it only blooms once or twice a year and you want people to be able to go see it. And sometimes it's wet. And so your idea is I'll build a pathway through the garden because it's behind a big tree you can't see from the window. And I want to do that. It's beautiful. So I start laying a path, have someone come lay the gravel and the sand and the concrete and going around the right side of the tree. And then I realize halfway there, oh my goodness, no, no, no. We have to go to the left side. That's where the sun rises. That's where the beauty is. Your contractor is going to say, look, we've done halfway already. I mean, they can just go to the other side of the tree. Once they get around it, they'll be very practical. But you're like, no, no, it's important that they see it as the sun rises. They're not going to tear up the concrete. They're just going to keep going and finish. Why? That's the path we built. It makes sense. If you think about laying a path, though, differently, a path is about the journey and how to get there. It's not about the concrete it's laid in. What if it were stones, that we lay these stones out this way, and as we're laying them out, you start walking, oh, no, 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 they must be the other side. You pick up those stones gently and you lay them out this way. And you start walking, you realize, well, that was my husband's gate. He laid these stones. Grandma can't get these. She needs a shorter step, so we have to add more steps. You adjust the path very simply by adjusting the stones that you have plenty of. That's what creating, to me, a book is, creating these beautiful stones that you'll lay the path later. That becomes the outline. That becomes the path. An outline doesn't create the path. An outline is the expression of this is how you get there now that I've done it. So That's a very bold claim for me to make. Because most of
I
my
was
peers
going to
say, no,
say,
you need an outline.
mm, I don't think I've heard anyone else say that, but it feels the word that came to me is that kind of organic. That it just and you only through taking the next step, it then reveals the next. And it's really tapping into that creative process. So I that to me makes I see it. I see it. And I
It
love the
allows
visual, the power.
Okay, it allows room for error, mistakes, chapters that don't go anywhere. In a concrete path, that chapter has to connect. You can't have a disconnect in the concrete in a path laid this way. But that's a very bold claim for me to make. The worst thing you can do for your book is start with an outline. But that's my bold claim. You can write bold claims into a book because it gets attention. It's like, who are you? What are you talking about? You can write stories into your book. You can write all sorts of wonders and, like I said, fierce wonderings you have that you don't have the answers for. And in a book, you can mix and match stories and these wonderings and these bold claims all together in different shapes, sizes, and amounts. One quote, let's call them quote chapters. I don't know what you'll call it. Doesn't matter what they're called. Might have 2 stories in a bold claim. It might have 3 fierce wonderings in a story. It doesn't matter, but pick one of those things to anchor in. Don't worry about, I need to have, this is not a thesis statement to prove an academic paper. 98% of us were trained to be academic writers, and 98% of us don't use academic writing in our regular life. We don't become
I
academics.
really yeah, and I think even as you're saying this, the thing that's coming across is that the message I really want to say to people is a little, get out every day, a daily dose. So even me thinking if I just wrote something every day, and I'm not a published poet or anything like that, but certainly out in nature, it does spark me to be playful with words. And I could put, why not? Why not pop a few of those in the book? Of a poem about autumn or the just, but maybe I would probably write them for children, for you to read aloud with your child and just tap into that the rhythm and the rhyme and I always remember Michael Rosen he's a famous poet, and he says that poems are to be read aloud and spoken, and the late great Benjamin Zephaniah, Michael Rosen talked of a story where he met him and he said, where do you write your poems? And he said, I don't write them. I walk and they come to me and I say them because that's what poetry is. And I think it's really fascinating that we've got in our head, as you say, and perhaps the teacher in me is there, and certainly the academic side, which later in my life, I do hope to, be involved in helping support, teachers and the future generation of education, and maybe even put nature on the agenda. I really do feel that. But right now, I'm in a headspace of I want to be present for my young children, and I think, well, rather than me worry about right, what am I doing, from an education point of view, is to really serve this and celebrate almost this unique moment because my eldest is now 8. You blink and that's gone. They grow up so fast. There's a saying, the days are long, but the years are short. It's fleeting. And I think this is why I feel the calling to do it now. And I guess it's how I fit it in. But I think, as you said, it doesn't have to be, this is my time block, it's on the schedule, and it has to be, that's an hour a day, or it, it doesn't need to be as rigid as that. But it is essentially something you should do daily. Is that correct? I remember when we were having our sort
Yeah,
of chat before.
right. Daily, or let's call it habitual, because I don't measure my writing in the amount of time I write. I measure my writing in the amount of words that float out of me. And some people don't know how many words they can write in a short time. And so that's one of the things I would encourage you to do. Anyone is, I don't know how many words I can write in an hour. And most people don't know how long a book actually is in words, because a publisher can make a book long or short based on font size and trim size and the thickness of the book. So we don't know how long books are in words. So the first thing you do if you're going to be an artist with words is become familiar with your word cadence. So maybe take 2 minutes and write one of these moments in nature. And at the end, count up how many words I wrote for 10 minutes. How many words did I write? And then you divide the number of words you wrote in 10 minutes by 10 and say, oh, my word count is X. For me, it's 28 words in a minute. And if I write 28 words in a minute, that doesn't seem like a lot of words. I mean, really isn't very fast. That's the word count I started when I was writing by hand. It's not much faster by typing, to be honest. But if I wrote that pace for 10 minutes, I'm doing pretty good. If I wrote that pace for 60 minutes, that would be 1,680 words. An average book length nonfiction book in the middle range of a book size is about 50,000 words. If I wrote for an hour every day with my little simple 28 words a minute, I would finish a 50,000 page book every month.
Well, yes.
If I wrote that pace 8 minutes a day at 28 words a minute, I would finish a book every 6 months, writing a book every 6 months. Doesn't time is an illusion of I need time. And what you need to do is say time is bent towards you. Because you've been in that flow state where you've just been in thinking like, wow, I've been here 10 minutes. I don't know how the time went so quickly. And you've been somewhere waiting for someone impatiently going, oh my gosh, I've been waiting. It's been 6 seconds and I feel like I'm waiting for the whole rest of my life for this light to change. So if you stop worrying about time, let time dissolve and worry about how many words will I get if I don't worry about time. I have 10 minutes. Then whatever comes in 10 minutes, that's the words I have, and keep track. Wow, I wrote 200 words in 10 minutes. That's amazing. The next day, 10 days, you have a chapter done. Pretty soon you'll write quicker and 10 minutes will become 12. You won't even notice that you've been out. It's the illusion of time. People who say they have a problem, I don't have time. I say, oh, no, you don't have a time problem. You have a word problem. You're not producing words. You're thinking, not writing. Stop thinking and write. Well, I need to think about what I'm writing. I'm like,
And I'm sat at the desk. Whereas, that one thing I find when you're outside is, and all the parents say this, uh, that where does that time go? It always goes so quickly when we come to the sessions. And it's exactly that. You just relax. You're not clock watching. And yeah, it brings it being out in nature, the magic is there of,
mm-hmm.
you get captivated by a bird that's up in the tree. I mean, it might not be that everyone out there is as a nature enthusiast, but I am by no means, and I just want to get this across, I am not a naturalist. My background isn't in that. I'm just somebody who's naturally curious, and I enjoy learning, and I enjoy, you know, like with gardening, it's simply I have a go. And it's that playfulness, I think, as well. And I feel for me, wanting to get families outdoors, it's that message of, get the boots on, get outside, and then just be surprising what and then often you get the children saying, well, they don't want to go out. My children say it, but as soon as they're out there, oh, they found a stick and then dragging leaves along, or they've spotted a snail, and they don't want to come in. It goes the other way
Mm-hmm.
around. So as simple as it sounds, I feel like that's the core of the book.
And
um
that's the simplicity of the solution
mm,
to your dilemma as well. So if you apply what you just said, I don't really feel like writing sometimes, but once I get out there is letting go of the mind's trap that this needs to be something. Be playful. This doesn't need to be anything. This is me showing up for this time I've given it, whether it's 10 minutes or an hour, and what comes, comes. You can put on your editor hat in your office where editors do things, but you don't
mhm,
need to put
mhm.
it on when you're writing. And let go of the idea that time's your problem. Time's not the problem. Time's an infinite thing you can create. The challenge is I'm not producing the words because I'm thinking, overthinking. Because I'm talking to you and I'm not thinking. It's just coming out. You're talking to me. You're not thinking. The words are just coming. That's the same way you should write. Academic writing is about overthinking, writing for someone else other than yourself, getting lost in the outcome. Wow, will this be good? Well, I don't want to do this again. I want to turn it in once. We have all this other thoughts about what we're doing and your intention for helping families. You might be writing for a nature agnostic. You might be writing for a sober nature person who doesn't go into nature, period. Whoever you're writing to call them back to nature. More than likely, it's somebody who's forgotten how much they love nature from the sound of the way you're talking. But either way, If you ever get stuck, you just put the name of that I give a person a name. I might say, Dear Jenny. And I just start writing to them. Like it's a letter, like my heart goes to them. Today I was sitting in the garden and I saw this. And as I sat there, it'll just come. You won't have to wonder what to say. So release yourself from the idea that this is a book. Release yourself from the idea that there's pages. Release yourself from the idea that there's only these words, these little stones I'm gathering into a mosaic, which will then become a stepping stone for someone. Either I'll use it now or somewhere else. And I think you'll find this ecstasy in writing. I'm one of those people who like to be done writing or like to disappear in writing. I don't like to think about writing because I think about it, it causes me anxiety. It causes me stress. It causes
Mm.
me worry. But when I sit down to do it and I let go of my thoughts, then the writing appears without me doing. And I count the words. I go, oh, great. I wrote words. That's all I needed today. Sometimes I'm writing, this is the worst thing I've ever written. I don't know why I'm doing this. There's better people than me. Those are the words that came out that day. Then I still count those words, but it's words because I need those words as a stepping stones. They might be something I have to shave off later because I want this not to be square and round. So I shave off those words and it's just perfect. So just trust that. When I watch bakers make beautiful cakes and I watch them cut off cake that they throw away, I'm like, and then I go, oh no, they needed that to cut the cake away to make the thing they're making. It's not a waste that they baked cake that they have to get rid of. It's artistic. It's a way to explore what the craft of the word play is. It's play first. Kids taught me this. I'm not telling you this because I learned at school. And teaching teachers on writing on how to let go of their thinking was the hardest part. Kids had no problem of letting go of thinking. And when they challenged me, I would lean into it. Watch your children and let them teach you what it is about the forest that you're missing when you're sitting behind your desk trying to think about what to write about the forest.
And I think your talk about it. It's refreshing to hear the reality that that inner critic, as you're saying, you sit down, write, and say, "No, I can't write anything." It's just going to be there, and it's part of the process, and it's almost accepting that it's trying to be there to, I guess, protect us ultimately, because we live in a day and age where you put your head above the parapet and say, as you say, have a strong opinion about something that might be a different look to or outcome to what other people say. It, but the hope is that it's about making a difference, and that
Yeah.
that purpose, I think, is why I keep showing up for it, and why I do things like I post on social media, and I do that because I want to get that message. And I have started a Substack, but interestingly, I have really struggled to be consistent, and I feel the word is exposed. I've deliberately written that as, I call it Nurturing Wild Mama, because I wanted it to be, this is not, consultant Julia, or teacher Julia, this is me. I want to talk a bit about the realities of motherhood as well through the lens of, outdoors primarily and ideas. But I have been really tentative about that. And then when have been open and shared, you get comments and reactions. I mean, touch wood, mine have been positive, but I felt really exposed. And so I sort of shied away from it. But I feel, again, with my intuition, that here is a platform where I can build my readership, and take them on almost this book journey, really, with me. And
Yeah.
yeah, but I'm stopping myself.
Yeah. Write about this being stuck. It will be so helpful for others to hear. And then write about what happens when you go out there and you try and write about that. And you'll find beautiful ways. Don't wait to share your message until you're done writing the book. Start sharing about it now. I'm writing here. I found this. I woke up middle of the night. I did this. I threw away half of. Just tell them that that's honest. If someone who's dyslexic who could barely pass college through his writing is teaching this, I want you to know it's not because I was taught in school. It's because I returned to a way of understanding that went beyond. And I learned from children that you can be creative despite what you've been taught. You can let go of all these contrived ideas of what writing is for, what it does, and trust it. So what's the one thing you'll take away from today's call that we can help other people with, that you'll maybe take away for this practice?
I think I've got so many great insights. I think the biggest message, I think, for me, is that how I am feeling is not. This is the process. I it's not something, "Oh, I need to go away and fix and resolve, and then I won't then I'm gonna be writing, and I'm not gonna have any of this kind of needling." This is the process. This is the rite of passage, and this is yeah, and I really like your message about even with me sharing that I'm struggling with the writing, just be honest and share that as well, I think is it feels quite refreshing, and I'm so grateful for this time. It's such a privilege, and I think with all the books you read about this is how to write, this is I've really got a lot from today. I really have. So
Great.
really thank you.
Julia, thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who's listening. Don't let the book die inside of you or believe that you weren't the one to write it because it feels hard. The feeling hard means you're on the right path. It's to deter those people who don't really trust that the resistance is the path. There is no other way. Someone can't take it from you. It's there for a reason. It's the thing that helps you teach you what you're trying to learn. All right. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you, Julia. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.